The format for this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, our secretary's announcements, a coffee and snack break, and our main speaker. Our first speaker for tonight is Rich K.
Hey everybody, how are you? I am Rich, I'm an alcoholic. And I am very, very happy to be here. Thank you, Lee, for inviting me. It is great to be at a meeting. I like going to meetings, and I always have. And I am very, very thankful that we have Zoom, so that option is available for people who still want to attend that way. But going to AA meetings has been a very, very important part of my life. Now, I only have 10 minutes, so I can't tell you my whole story, but I'll talk a little bit about maybe a little bit about my history of going to meetings, and hopefully something will be helpful, especially to those of you who identified as newcomers. You're very welcome here. We're very, very happy to have you, and I hope you feel like you're home. I eventually did at meetings, not right away, but I eventually did. My sobriety date is January 2nd, 2002. I know my sobriety date well. However, I do not know the date of the first meeting I went to. And the reason is I did not want to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. People were telling me to come to Alcoholics Anonymous for about 10 years before I finally came, but I was determined not to come. I had crossed all kinds of lines, drinking on the job, nod if that's familiar. You don't have to nod, but right? I had gotten gout because I drank so much. I had gotten a medieval disease because I'm not making it up. And the interesting thing was, I went to a doctor, I described my symptoms, and he said, okay, my shoe and sock was off. He looks at my foot and he goes, boom. And I wince, and he goes, aha, you have gout. And he asked me how much I drank. Okay, doc. Turns out that doctor had 8 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he joined the list of people at that point who said maybe you should come to AA. But I was determined not to come into these rooms. And so what I was determined to do was to prove to all those people I wasn't an alcoholic by stopping on my own. All right? I am going to put the plug in the jug, as they say. I don't need your damn program. Let's see what happens. And then things really got ugly. Then things were really, really uncomfortable. I had a doctor, I had a therapist, a very good, decent man. He said, okay, maybe you're not an alcoholic. Right out of the big book, he said, why don't you try some controlled drinking? See how you do if and when you go out by having just 2 drinks. I said, no problem at all, doc. I'd order that first. 2. Order this. And then I was miserable. I was totally miserable. More miserable having had the 2 drinks, right, than even just taking the whole night off. Why? Because eventually I found out, very astute observation in the big book, the phenomenon of craving. I was never a guy who could just have 1 drink or 2 drinks. I really believe that's one of the great insights in the book, that phenomenon of craving. Once it's game on, it's game on. But I went on like that for years and years. I could take many weeks off, actually. But somebody said once that, if you're a heavy drinker or you have a problem with alcohol, but you're not an alcoholic, and you manage to quit, stop drinking, your life will probably get better. But if you really are an alcoholic and you manage to quit, your life is going to get a heck of a lot worse. And why is that? It's the medicine. It's the thing that momentarily could numb me out from the underlying sense of agitation, discomfort. There's a great thing in our big book on page 52. It's called The Bedevilments, right? We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't control our emotional nature, couldn't seem to be useful to other people. And I wanted to check out from all of that. I really did. And alcohol was the thing that allowed me to momentarily do it. But of course, who can just have 2 drinks? So I'm drinking more and more. I'm drunk on the job. I'm going into work with epic hangovers so that I'm worthless in the morning. And there are other things that are happening which I didn't relate to my alcoholism, but I came to realize it, right? not a lot of good relationships in my life, right? You know, the relationships aren't working very well. I'm becoming less and less employable, all of this stuff. But I ain't going to AA. I am not going to AA. I used to work at a restaurant in West Los Angeles, and it was 2 doors down from a place called the Log Cabin. Log Cabin, you think of it as an Alano club. It's not, technically, but it's a little bit like one. There are meetings there 7 days a week, all the time. And I used to be there. I was at my waiter job, which I hated, and I'd be sitting there. I was probably a little buzzed, and then there'd be a lull, and I'd be looking at it, and I'd say, those losers, man. And this was back in the 90s, so there was the huge cloud of smoke, right, at the break, everyone's smoking, and I just thought, man, no way, nothing for me. I was so, wrapped tight and emotionally unbalanced that when I was waiting tables, I remembered I got stiffed on a tip, right? Bad. And I walked into the bus station and I punched a wall and broke my hand. Now, I didn't know it then, but I really think that had a lot to do with untreated alcoholism. It really did. So, but finally, I was miserable enough to come in. And the great thing that happened before I got a sponsor, before I started working steps, was I showed up and there were some very pleasant, friendly people. And I went back the next week and they remembered me. Maybe they remembered my name or just remembered I was the guy who was new the week before. And I was dying for that connection. I didn't know it at the time, and I wasn't a hermit, and I wasn't totally isolated, but I was dying for that connection with people. And it meant a heck of a lot to me, and that's what drew me in, right? It says somewhere in the literature, alcoholism is lonely business, and it was very, very lonely business. And the great thing when I got to meetings was, so like in the origin story of AA, basically, and I'm not an AA historian, but basically what happened was Bill Wilson, he goes on a business trip, he goes to Ohio, he's been sober for a while, but he's worried his business trip isn't going well, the bar is right there, he's afraid he's going to go get loaded, and what Bill found out was that if he could work with another alcoholic, he had already had experience, that showed him that might keep him from drinking. And so this is basically AA's origin story to keep it moving. He gets in touch with, I guess, a local minister, somebody in town, and says, yeah, there's this guy Bob, this Dr. Bob guy, has a tremendous problem controlling his drinking. Why don't you speak to him? See if he wants to speak to you. And the story goes basically, too, that Bob was just like, I just, no way, man. I mean, I don't want to. But the bottom line was they ended up, Bob, I think the story goes, he told his wife, I'll talk to this guy for 15 minutes, then we're going to leave. And they ended up speaking for hours. And that's kind of the origin story of AA. It's kind of the essence of AA for me. One of the big foundations, the ability we have to connect with each other and identify with each other. It's a precious, important thing, and it was what I needed more than ever. One alcoholic talking to another, because you all kind of thought in some of the same screwy ways as I did. You had some of those weird ideas. It wasn't just that you took one drink and then found yourself, passed out with an empty bottle in your hand. It was that you drank like that, but it was also the fear, the concern, the anxiety, all those things, that we work through in Alcoholics Anonymous by supporting each other. And our symbol is what? The circle with the triangle in it, right? And the triangle, the three sides, unity, recovery, service, right? And service, we know, is so important, right? And it can be anything, right? And it doesn't even have to be in AA. It's learning to become more selfless. Yeah, right. To become less selfish, more selfless. We know that that's critical. So there's service. Recovery are our steps, and that was critical for me. I've gone through the steps a couple of times, and just critically important to have done it. But our unity is a precious thing. The fact that we're in this together. There's another little snippet from the book that said self-reliance failed us. And I was raised both personally and culturally to believe you got to figure it all out for yourself. Well, sometimes you need some help, right? If you had diabetes or something terrible like that, you wouldn't try and cure yourself. You'd get help. And this was the place where I got the help. It's a precious thing. So for the 8 or 10 of you who are new, whether you're brand new or coming in again, I hope you find that foundation, that ability just to connect with people. You don't walk into the rooms, not everybody is saintly and friendly and terrific, but you will find people, I mean, we're human beings, pretty troubled human beings, but you will find people who will treat you with kindness and decency. They'll remember your name the next meeting. And if you're anything like me, that means a heck of a lot, and it'll be a great foundation for you to get sober and stay sober and move on with your life in a great way. So I want to thank you all, and I look forward to hearing my dear friend Lee in a little while.
Keep going.
Now, our main speaker will share her experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Lee from the desert.
Sorry.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Great. Hi, I'm Lee, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. And first, let's give Rich a round of applause for that great share. I've known Rich most of his sobriety, and it was just great to hear your message. What a great message you share. So thank you for that. And, it's so funny how when you plan things, like I had all these things planned for this. Like I was going to thank Kelly, who's the speaker getter. She's not here. I was going to thank everyone, congratulate everyone who took a cake, and they don't celebrate cakes here. So all of that is completely out the window, and I have no idea what I'm going to say. So anyway. But first, I do want to thank Kelly for asking me to be here. It's an honor and a privilege to speak at any meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. And I also want to thank Aaron for totally freaking me out, because he upsold this meeting like you wouldn't believe. Like, this is a pinnacle of AA speaker meetings. So I'm not at all nervous, Aaron. So thank you for that. Yeah, no pressure at all. And congratulations to the birthday folks. That 1 year, 43, 45, that's absolutely amazing. And I think it's incredibly important to celebrate and honor milestones in sobriety, because it shows the newcomers that this thing works. And that's why we keep coming back. So congratulations, it's so awesome. And to the newcomers, I hope you stay. I hope you don't ever have to go back out there again. Oh, another thing that was planned is I was going to have a newcomer, or not a newcomer, well, yeah, she is a newcomer, take me to this meeting and drive me, but she decided to drink last night. Yeah. And, but I know I'm here, and that's what I've done, is I've just kind of shown up. And, so newcomers, I hope you stay, right? I think about the last couple of years and what that's sort of done to the world and alcoholics. And I think about, there's a couple of statistics that are just staggering for me during the pandemic. One of them is in 2020, alcohol sales rose 300%. 300%. And then in addition to that, teenage overdoses doubled. And in the last year, 2021, they rose another 20%. So that tells me a couple of things. Right? It tells me that there was a lot of self-medicating going on. And it tells me another thing, that a lot of us didn't make it back, right? So for those of us who get to come back and come into these rooms, because in the time I've been sober, I've never once seen anyone relapse, come into the rooms and want to relapse again. Because when we come in here, either for the first time or the 17th time or whatever, we come in and we're broken. I know I was. And I was scraping the bottom of the emotional and spiritual barrel when I got here. But anyone who gets to come back into these rooms, in my opinion, and everything I say up here is my opinion, is lucky. because we get to try this thing again, right? Because there are those of us who don't come back. And why? Because we die. Because this disease is not only cunning, it's baffling, it's powerful. And in my home group, there was a guy years ago who, whenever he was asked to read chapter 5, I'm sure to the chagrin of many AA purists in that meeting, but he would always insert 2 words. He would always say it's a cunning, baffling, powerful, patient, and deadly disease. And I believe that. I believe that my disease is waiting for me outside these walls when, as it says in the big book, it says that I will have no effective mental defense against that first drink. It says it in black and white that there may come a time when that might happen. And so what do I do today to ensure that that doesn't happen and I don't pick up that first drink? That's also in the big book, and I'm paraphrasing, but my understanding is that my sobriety is contingent on the daily maintenance of my spiritual condition. And what I do today to maintain my spiritual condition looks a lot different than when I got here. When I got here, to maintain my spiritual condition might have looked like polishing off an entire pizza all by myself, or eating an entire party-sized bag of Doritos, or running 4 miles a day, right? That's how I maintain my spiritual condition. But I turned 51 this year, and my hips don't like pizza, although tonight's pizza was really good. And my knees can't handle running 4 miles a day. So I have not only been physically compelled, I've been spiritually compelled to pick up the kit of spiritual tools that was laid at my feet when I got here. Things like going to meetings and being of service, doing the steps, calling my sponsor and picking up that 1,000-pound phone when I don't want to talk to anybody, right? That's what I get to do. And newcomers, I hope you stay here long enough where you get to pick up these tools too. Because these tools and so many others are the tools that have totally transformed my life. So in my opinion, Alcoholics Anonymous for an alcoholic like me, and I'm totally an alcoholic. I am a real alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is the easier, softer way. So I hope you stay. My sobriety date is August 13th, 1998. My sponsor is Debbie A., and my home group is the 7 a.m. Attitude Adjustment Meeting at Fellowship Hall in Palm Desert, where if you go outside right now, you'll spontaneously combust because it's so freaking hot. I mean, it's so hot. But throughout my sobriety, I've always had those 2 things. I've always had a sponsor and I've always had a home group. And I believe because I've had those 2 things continuously throughout my sobriety, I've been able to keep a 3rd thing, and that is the most important thing for me, and that is my only and original sobriety date. And I cherish that date because I believe on that day I was born again. I was born into a life I never thought possible for someone like me. On that day, I stepped out of the darkness I've been living in my whole life and walked into the sunlight of the Spirit. And that's where I've remained ever since. And that's not to say that every day is a holiday and every meal is a feast, unless, of course, you're Aaron. I'm kidding. I love you, But I know it's a heck of a lot better than it ever was when I was out there. So I'm here to share my experience, strength, and hope. And what that means is I get to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And I hope I get to what it's like now because it's pretty awesome. But I'm also, hi, Lee, a recovering drama queen. So sometimes I like to hang in what it was like a little too long because, drama. But we'll see what God has planned. I was definitely born an alcoholic. I was born into an alcoholic home. When my parents met, it was like 2 garbage trucks colliding. I mean, you can see it, right? And I love that analogy. That's our friend Charlie's analogy. And I love it. I use it because it's so indicative of alcoholic relationships because we're so messy. We're messy, and my parents were without a doubt a case in waste management. And so they met. It was tumultuous. It was crazy. And they had my sister 11 months later. They had me. And not too long after I was born, he took off, leaving my mom with 2 kids and no support, financial or otherwise. And, she was an alcoholic and young. I think she was 21 when she had us. And I don't think that she had the tools to really deal with that kind of loss, to deal with that abandonment. And unfortunately for me, I looked exactly like him. And so for a woman who was scorned, an alcoholic, pissed off, I was basically like this little miniature reminder of someone who had hurt her. And she treated me that way. I always felt different. I never felt loved. She always treated me differently than my siblings. And so our relationship was really fragmented at best. And I wish I could say that I was able to repair that relationship, but she died when I was 8. And she died at the age of 29, you know, and it was sad. And, you know, she died of this disease. And it wasn't that she didn't die of a drug overdose or anything like that. But she was on the back of a motorcycle with a man who wasn't her husband. They got into an accident, and she died of blunt force trauma. And her blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. And so I've often wondered, you know, if she hadn't been drinking that much that night, would she have made that decision that changed all of our lives instantly? And I'll never know, you know. But the only thing I do know is that as an alcoholic, I don't have choices, right? I don't have decisions, because alcohol really dictates everything I do when I'm drinking, right? So I don't think she had a choice. And for me, it's not decisions, it's not choices, it's repercussions, it's damage. That's what happens when I drink. And so my stepfather, who she was cheating on, wasn't about to take care of us. So we moved from Washington State, where we were living, down to Texas, and moved in with my grandmother, who had just lost her oldest daughter, her firstborn, and she was an alcoholic and didn't really have the tools to deal with that kind of loss either. And, you know, and she had already been taking care of an older sister, so now she was taking care of 2 more of her grandchildren on a teacher's income, so she had to work 3 jobs to make ends meet. And so there wasn't a lot of love coming my way there either, because she simply had no time. And, you know, after doing a lot of work, a lot of therapy, a lot of step work, I totally appreciate everything she did for us. But growing up, it was really hard, you know, because as a kid, all you want is love. All you need is love, right? And I wasn't getting it there either. So that's when I engaged in my first drug of choice. And that was like, I was like 9, 10, and I hit that thing hard, and that was fantasy, right? You know, I could sit in my room for hours and daydream the day away, because it was just too much, too hard. And, you know, I didn't do a lot of like early underage drinking. Like my sponsor got sober when she was 14. Like, what? And she's 45 years sober. I mean, I don't know how you do that, but, you know, so she was like pounding away at 10. I don't know. Anyway, but so, you know, so a couple of things sort of kept me from really early underage drinking. I do remember my first drunk. I was probably around 14 or so, something like that. It was in this little town in Texas. And I was with my cousin and her friends, and it was a mixture of Southern Comfort and Strawberry Hill wine. Right? It's just like a gag reflex, like, you know. I mean, but the funny thing about that, it was like this magical elixir, because it like, when it went down, I'm short, it made me tall, right? When it went down and burned, it, you know, my hair is curly, it made it straight. It gave me, you know, all the things that I thought I wanted, but the most important thing it gave me was that, you know, that deep breath in I wanted. But then because I'm a pig when I drink, I proceeded to get totally wasted, passed out, puked over everything, because that's what I do. I black out and I puke. And so that scared me. I didn't, you know, I was out of control. So I was like, okay, I can't do that again. So that kind of saved me some from early underage drinking. Also, my grandmother was an alcoholic, and how she behaved when she was drunk was embarrassing. You know, she would slur her words. She wouldn't remember what she did. She was mean. And so I didn't want to be like that. So I didn't want to do that. And then in addition to all of that, I was also very weird looking. I was about as big as a toothpick. And, as you can, I have curly hair. I have naturally curly hair. And before naturally curly hair grows down, it grows out. Okay? And so and this is the 80s. And so, my nicknames were like stop sign, tennis racket, ET, lollipop. So I just looked really weird. So, no one was banging down my door to party because I just looked so odd. And then, I met him, right? And he was my boss at my first job. I'm fairly certain there was some grooming going on, but that's a whole nother meeting. And so, he was 9 years older than me. I was 17. He was 26. And but he introduced me to a very adult drink. It was Malibu rum and pineapple juice. And so, I felt like an adult. I felt like I could manage it. I didn't get too wasted too fast. And so I just felt fabulous. And so we dated. My grandmother, who I live with, did not know anything about that. And then she found out. And obviously she was not happy I was dating someone 9 years older than me. And so she decided, well, okay, if he's an adult, then he can take care of you. So she kicked me out of the house 2 weeks before my high school graduation. And maybe a normal kid would be like, no, I'll take that scholarship to that really good college. Or no, if you want to pay for, I will go. But I didn't do that because I loved him. I wanted to be with him. And his chest hair and his gold jewelry and his hair that was parted down the middle and his little shorts. Like, that's what I wanted, right? That's what I chose because I loved him so much. And, but after doing like a lot of work again, it was like the reason why I chose him is not because I loved him. It's because being with him afforded me the opportunity to drink whenever I wanted. And that's why I wanted to be with him. And so, I was kicked out, and then we were living together. So I think I was with him for about a year and a half. And during that time, I was never faithful to him. I'm a serial cheater. But during that time, a couple of things happened. He had said to me, and I don't know about you, I have sometimes selective hearing. Like someone will say something to me, but what I hear is completely different. And so what I heard was, if you should get a trade because you're never going to amount to anything. And so I ended up going to Jackie Nell Executive Secretary School in Austin, Texas. And at Jackie Nell, I ended up meeting a woman who, because I had lost, again, another job because I couldn't have normal jobs. And she was a cocktailer. And she made really good money. And she cocktailed at this nightclub in Austin, and I was like, are they hiring? Because I need to make some money. And she's like, full disclosure, it was like a strip club. And so, literally full disclosure. So I'm cocktailing, and I'm making good money, right? And then I see these women, and they get up, and they take their top off, and in 2 minutes, they're like making $20. So I'm like, I could do that. So, I did that for 2.5 years. And the only reason why I can say that from a podium and knowing that it's recorded is because the 9-step promises have come true for me. I do not regret the past, nor do I wish to shut the door on it. And it was during that time that I've been suicidal twice in my life, and that was the first time because I couldn't do what I was doing. Sober. That was actually a time when I was drinking pretty much every day. And by the way, I was the worst stripper. I'm I could never find the sweet spot of actually being like drunk enough to like do the dance and not passing. It was just so bad. So, so this takes me to about, the beginning of 93. And so it's January 93, and I am in desperate need of a geographic, okay? Because as a good recovering hoe bag, been there, done that, done everyone, okay? So I needed to leave Texas. So I was either going to move to New York or Los Angeles. And I met someone who lived in LA. We dated, great guy. We're actually still very good friends. And so I moved, we met in April, and I moved to LA in August of '93. And I was a good girl for a while, drank okay. I wasn't getting too wasted too fast or anything like that. But the funny thing about geographics is that wherever you go, there you are. And if you haven't dealt with your baggage, it all comes with you, right? And so November of '93, and this is I'm not going to get into a big drunkalogue because this one night really sort of encapsulates how I drank, right? And I call myself a bar mat drinker. I don't know if anyone's ever seen what behind the bar looks like when bartenders or whatever, there's mats behind there that catch all the alcohol. That's basically me. It's like, I'll have that, right? So he and I go to this it was a Thanksgiving party, okay? I mean, this is one of my favorite holidays. I love Thanksgiving. It's a day to be grateful, a day to be thankful. So I go to this party, and I proceed to have a night of bar mat drinking. So it's champagne, wine, Jim Beam, beer, Jack Daniels, tequila, like all of it. And so, as I mentioned, I'm also a blackout drinker. So I kind of come to and I walk out of the bathroom I'm in, and my boyfriend is standing right there. And he's giving me that look that the people who love us give us when we disappoint them, right? And he's standing there, and I'm all like, what? Like, what are you looking at? And then the next thing I know, 2 people walk out of the bathroom. Okay, to this day, I have no idea what I was doing in there. I don't know how loud we were. I don't even know what we were doing. I don't know if I was doing cocaine. I don't know if I was doing them and cocaine. Like, I don't know. And so he's like, obviously very embarrassed. And we leave. And then we get in the car, and then he wants to confront me about my drinking. Sorry, I don't want anyone to confront me about my drinking. So I'm trying to get out of the car, right? Yeah. And so then he stops the car, and then he starts shaking me because he's like, he doesn't know what to do, right? He's like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And I did the only thing I knew how to do, and I just started punching him in the face, like 10 times, just like punching him. And I'll never forget his face, and he was just like, I was hitting him, and he was looking at me like, why are you doing this? And in my mind, I'm like, why are you doing this? Why? Just stop. Why can't you just stop? And I couldn't. And so the next day I woke up, I had this, the incomprehensible demoralization that they talk about in the big book. And I told him, I said, I'm so sorry. I love you. I won't do that again. I'll stop drinking. And he said, whatever you're going to do, you do it for you. Don't do it for me. And but I did it for him. I stopped drinking for like 11 months, but I didn't go to AA. But I did it for him. And I think I smoked pot once during that time. I was white-knuckling it the whole time. I was so uncomfortable. I was so bitter, right? And then after the 11 months, I realized it wasn't me, it was him. I needed a new boyfriend, right? But the thing about me and men, it was like, alcohol and men, that was like my drugs, right? And they gave me the same sort of feeling. But with me and relationships, when I'm out there, it doesn't have anything to do with the guy. It's like Lee plus guy A equals crappy relationship. Lee plus guy B equals crappy just take the guy out. It's Lee equals a crappy relationship, right? I am the common denominator in all of that mess. And it wasn't until I had like 4 years of sobriety that I actually realized that. But anyway, we break up, and fast forward a few years, a couple of more boyfriends, and I have another night of bar mat drinking. And so this is 98, August of 98. And I had broken up with a boyfriend because he just wasn't doing it my way. And I don't know about you. He wanted to just take a break, but I didn't have, I had prisoners and hostages. I didn't have boyfriends, really. And so you couldn't take a break, right? It was all or nothing. So he wanted a break, but I just broke it off. But I soon realized that to be alone meant I had to be alone with myself, and that was worse than death because I hated who I was. I hated who I'd become. I carried so much shame, so much guilt for all the stuff I did. And so I had this night of drinking, and I get to my apartment, and I'm at this place again. And I was on my kitchen floor. I had every knife in my kitchen next to me and a bottle of tequila. And I was just trying to figure out which knife was going to do the job. And I would touch my wrist, and then something, and I know that it was my higher power, said, not tonight. Let's not do this tonight. And I had called my sisters, wasted. They were obviously very concerned. One of my sisters told me later on that she called my boyfriend and said, can you just go check on her, and if she's dead, then call me, So he saw me in a state that was just not good. But the next day, and I know that if I didn't have to get on a plane that next day, I probably wouldn't be here. But I had to go to Texas. My sisters were baptizing their kids. So I go there and I laugh the whole thing off. Oh, it's a bad night of drinking. Oh, sorry, But I was dead. I was dying inside. And so what happened on that trip is that exactly what needed to happen for me. And I'd gotten into an argument with my grandmother. And it was a screamy match in front of my niece. She's 7 years old, and two grown women just yelling at the top of their lungs over something so trivial. And I was so embarrassed, I was so embarrassed. And instead of looking at my grandmother like I had always looked at her, which was, I don't want to be like you, it was like, I don't want to be like you anymore, right? I saw myself 40 years from now, and I was like, there is no way I can do that, being this resentful, jealous, bitter, angry person, manipulative. Like I couldn't fast forward 40 years and see my life leading that way. And so my last drink was a beer, one beer. That was it. Had I known it was going to be my last beer, I probably would have had 17,000 more, and then I probably wouldn't be here, but that was it. So I came back to LA. I was still single. I was still sober, And I called my ex-boyfriend. It was a Wednesday night. I called my ex-boyfriend and I said, "Can you please come over? I needed that relief. I needed something." And he said no. And I thank God he did. I cried myself to sleep that night. And fortunately for me, a year before I got sober, a therapist who actually is down the street, Valerie, she's in Hermosa, that woman saved my life. She planted the seed of sobriety in me. And so when I woke up that next morning, I knew exactly who to call, and that was Alcoholics Anonymous. I called AA, central office. So I called them. It was 10 o'clock. I said, "Is there a meeting close by?" And they said, "Yep, there's one at 2020 Avenue of the Stars, the Lunch Bunch group." And it was 5 minutes from my house. So I walk into the meeting. I got there late because I'm not going to go to an AA meeting. So I got to the meeting, and the leader had just finished sharing, and the topic of the meeting was self-pity, which I had been nesting in my whole adult life, by the way. And so, and it was very curious to me because I really didn't know about AA. I thought AA was going to teach me how to sip, cross my legs when I drank. I don't know. But what happened in that meeting is, in my opinion, what happens in AA meetings, and that's magic. I heard people speaking truth, their truth, and it was something that I had never heard before. How much time do I have, by the way? 15. Okay, great, thanks. So, and it was men and women, and as superficial as it is for, I saw what I needed to see. right? This was a meeting called the Lunch Bunch Group. So these people had jobs to go back to. They were on their lunch break, and they had jobs to go back to. You know, they had all their teeth. I needed to see that. I'm sorry, but I did, you know, because I saw people not only surviving sober, but thriving in sobriety. You know, then after the meeting, I walked up to this guy, and I don't know if this is how he looked, but this is how I remember him. He was like in all white and had a white beard. And I asked him, I said, how much time do you have? And he said, I have just as much time as you have. I have today. And I'm so happy he said that because it stuck with me, you know, a day at a time. And then this woman named Blanca, I'll never forget, she had this gorgeous accent. She asked me, she said, do you want to talk? And I said, yes, please. You know, I mean, and this poor woman, I verbally vomited all over her for like an hour, you know. But I thought it was so weird. That whole thing was weird. Like, lady, I don't even know you. Why are you buying me coffee? What do you want? You know? But that's what we do, you know. And then also, I thought AA was such a cult because it was like, hey, Lee, how you doing? You know? You got 30 days today. I was like, weird, you know? But I'm so one of those people now, like, hey, how's it going? Oh my God, you got a year, you know? Because when you experience that darkness, right? And when someone comes in and we know, I mean, if you have 8 days of sobriety, I have been through 8 days of sobriety once, I don't ever want to go back there again. Because that is hard, right? This is crazy, right? They always say you come in for your drinking, but you stay for your thinking, right? That's what I heard. And I'll give you an example of my thinking, right? So I had about a year and a half, 2 years sober, and I'm dating a normie, right? Normie. And so I'm doing this crossword puzzle, and it says, you know, whatever a cross is, you know, a 6-letter word for a reason to drink. And I'm like, oh, okay, relapse, marriage, you know, it's like literally going down the gamut, right? So then he walks by, I'm like, what do you think this is? He's like, thirst? Literally not in my top 50 choices of a reason to drink, right? Because I don't think normally, right? I am not a normal thinker. It's like you look at the 20 questions, right? You substitute, you know, do you drink alone? Do you think alone? Like that's exactly, like I am a thinker for sure. But, you know, so I got into Alcoholics Anonymous and I got busy, right? When I got in, I got all the way in. I got a sponsor. I took my sponsor's suggestions. She said, you need to get commitment. So what did I do? I got a commitment. And my very first commitment was at a Beverly Hills women's meeting, okay? So I don't know about you, but I had a proper early sobriety car, okay? It was like a Mazda 323, couldn't get in on the driver's side, no air conditioning and power steering. And I drive up to this Beverly Hills women's meeting where I'm parked next to a Bentley and a Rolls and a Mercedes. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I can't even look at myself in the mirror, but I'm a greeter. So then I have to say, hi, how are you? You know? And then I have to listen and I have to be there. And then for some godforsaken reason, I took their coffee commitment, which is just short of a barista at a Starbucks, right? But I did it because what happens is you go to the meeting before the meeting, right? And I start identifying with people and people start asking, how are you doing? That sort of thing. And I start hearing all of the messages that I need to hear because I go to meetings and I don't miss meetings. You know, I have 23 years of sobriety and, you know, I still go to a lot of meetings because I love hearing all of those catchphrases, right? All of those little catchphrases that mean so much to me. First things first. I remember I had under a year sobriety and I would call my sponsor all the time, right? Just, and, you know, I told her, I'm like, oh my God, I want to be married. I'm never going to be married. And she's like, Lee, you want to be married? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, you're not even dating anyone. You know, she's like, can you just brush your teeth, right? Can you just make your bed, eat breakfast? Like, she broke it down to something that was way more tangible for me. And that's what I love about Alcoholics Anonymous is As I said, I'm a pig, right? When it comes to life, I am a forever tripper and a past tripper, okay? It's like as though I want the whole buffet all at once, all the time. And what happens when you do that? You choke, right? You can't do anything because that's all, I was always over there or over here. I was never here, right? And Alcoholics Anonymous said, no, you don't need to do all of that. Here, I'm going to give you life in these little tiny bite-sized morsels that you get to savor every single day, just a day at a time. That's it, right? So it's first things first. Easy absolutely does it, right? The harder I fight anything, the harder whatever it is, right? So again, I go to meetings, I'm doing all the stuff, doing all the things, and one of the joys of my life is sponsoring women, and I've sponsored women throughout my sobriety, all throughout my sobriety, and I love it. And I remember, one of the things about sponsorship is that for me, it keeps me on a very straight and narrow path, and that's what I need, right? Because I can't just talk the talk. When I'm sponsoring someone, I have to walk the walk. I have to mean it. And I'll give you an example of that. I had about 5 years of sobriety, almost 5, and I was sponsoring a woman who was right about to do her 9th step amends. And this was a 9th step financial amends. And I told her, I'm like, yes, absolutely. You must do those. Had I done mine? No, right? And what happens, and what I realized back then, is when I say something and I'm not doing it, then I start doing something what I call cheese grater living, right? Where you're living on a cheese grater and it's really uncomfortable because I can't just BS. I have to do it. So I knew I was going to have to do my financial amends. So I'd worked at a nightclub, an actual nightclub, and so over the course of about 3 years, I had stolen $1,000. And so I knew I was going to have to pay that back. So I called, the general manager was still there, and I said, can you meet? We finally met. And so he's like, well, let's go to dinner. I'm like, before we go to dinner, I should probably tell you why I'm here. And I told him, I said, I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, so am I. I'm like, oh my God. And he said, in fact, as a matter of fact, today is my 11th sober birthday. And so I made amends. I said, I told him what I just told you guys. And he said, I'm the money guy here. And so I dictate where the money goes. He says, I want you to keep your money, but I want you to pay it forward. So if you see a homeless person on the street and you got $20 in your pocket, whatever you got in your pocket, you're going to give it to that person. If there's someone who needs help, you're going to help them and you're not going to tell anybody. And I can honestly say that I've done that, because I can't live that way. It's too uncomfortable, right? So other messages, right? One of the things that I love hearing too is there's something that someone said to me years ago, don't leave before the miracle happens, right? And what I've learned in AA, thank you, what I've learned in AA is that miracles continue to happen, right? As I mentioned, I'm a recovering hoe bag, okay? I've been with one man for 19 years, right? Woo! Like literally uncharted territory, Christopher Columbus sailing toward America, like bizarre. Every single day, right? It's just bizarre. So another example of that is, I have a sister who I mentioned who we're cut from the same cloth, drank exactly the same way. I'm in the program 11 years. Every single meeting, when they say, pray for the alcoholic who still suffers, she's the first person on my list that I'm praying for. And then she ended up getting sober, right? And I remember it was a couple of years after she got sober where, she had caused a lot of damage in and out of the program, right? For the first couple of years, I didn't want to see her actually because she had caused so much damage in her family life. And so finally, I was going to go see my other sister who lives in the same town, and my husband, who's also in the program, said, are you going to go see her? And I was like, well, she hasn't even given me an amends. She hasn't made amends to me. But thank God, he's in the program, and he's like, I really don't think that that's what this is about. I was like, whatever. So, I texted her. I was like, hey, do you want to meet? And she said, yeah. She goes, do you want to go to breakfast and maybe my home group after? And I was like, sure, why not? And so when I walked into that restaurant, I didn't see my sister. I saw a woman who had been transformed by Alcoholics Anonymous. We went to that meeting, and she shared, we both cried, and she shared, when my sister texted me, I knew the promises were coming true in my life because I never thought she was going to want to see me again. And then, she stayed sober for almost 12 years. And within the last few months, she went out again. And she had been on a relapse for this last year. And I knew something was up. It was April. I knew something was up, and I called my other sister. I said, please, just go check on her. My sister walked in, and it was a relapse. It was a relapse for a long time. It was like a hoarder, like a path to the bathroom, a path to the couch. And so I saw her. She FaceTimed me, and I could see it. I could see the shame. I could see all of it. And then, I'm going to probably cry because of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So as soon as we walked in, as soon as my sister saw that, we called her sponsor. And within 30 minutes, right? Within 30 minutes, her sober sisters, who she hadn't seen in months, were at her house cleaning. Packed a bag so she could stay at their home and be safe. And she just celebrated 90 days, right? And so it's those miracles, right? And I see it all the time. So newcomers, I hope you stay here long enough. Don't leave before the miracle happens. And thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. Thanks.